Alright, welcome to another episode. Today we're going to be going through my little project here, and I want to print a negative that is part of a series that I've been working on this year that I really like, but it doesn't fit really well with the rest of the project. You know, sometimes when you're shooting something, a series or project or whatever it is that you're working on, you get some great images that they just don't fit with everything else. Like, they just don't work with all the other images. They're great on their own, but they don't mix well with everything else. And that's one of those things that you really have to take into consideration when you are really putting together a project, not just the individual images, how they stand on their own, but how they work together. And this is an image that I really like, but it just doesn't work with the rest of the images on this project. So I want to take this opportunity and print this here. You can see that this roll is very well underexposed. I shot this whole project at 1600 on Tri-X, and you can see in the lower right hand corner here especially, it's pretty dark. This whole roll, or this whole project, was all shot on Tri-X 35mm, all pushed to 1600, and all developed in Kodak D76 on a stock solution. So to give me a real contrasty, kind of gritty look, which is what I'm going for. So I'm pulling the negative out here. I'm always very careful not to get any oils or dust, and just saves me a lot of headache in the end, having to spot or anything. I'm loading this in a glass negative carrier, which, since I got it, that's pretty much all I use anymore. It's a 6x7 carrier, and I use it for everything. It's going into my Omega 760. I'm using just a regular Fuji 75mm f5.6 lens. I use all of my, I print everything to start on a grade 2 for variable contrast if I'm not using graded paper. And for these images, especially this one, it's got a lot of contrast already. Arista Ultra Cold Tone has been my go-to developer for some time now. I started with Dectal, but this Ultra Cold Tone has a much more neutral, cold image tone that I really like, and especially when it starts to get a little exhausted, it's just a beautiful, beautiful developer. I use the Ilford odorless stop bath because it's just the only odor issues that I run into personally are stop baths. They stink so bad that glacial acid, it just stinks so much. The fixer, I don't mind. The fixer, I actually like the smell of it, especially when it gets on like my clothes or like rags. It has a really nice smell that I really enjoy. I'm using Kodak Rapid Fix. This is a hardening fixer, which really helps with the veiling that is really prevalent on a lot of RC papers. It's kind of like this haze that appears over all your dark tones and your blacks. And the hardening fixer kind of helps with that. I don't have an infrared resin paper dryer, or else it would completely eliminate that, so I just work with what I got. So I bring the negative into focus here. I've already set the dimensions on my easel to give me the correct borders. And I get everything lined up. I'm setting my timer here. It's an excellent timer. I can go all the way down to fractions of a minute. I'm loading my paper up here, kind of standard stuff. So when I do my test prints, I use a full sheet and I do 1 second increments. This is very important for me because the 1 second increments give me very fine detail, and using a whole sheet gives me a far better idea of what my image is going to look like. And it actually saves me paper in the long run. For a long time I used strips and it ended up costing me so much paper because you never really get a full a good idea of what you're going to see until you see the full image, and then I end up going back and doing it again. So as you can see from right to left here, we've got 1 second increments, and once you get to about 5 or 6 seconds, it's really difficult to tell on camera, but the changes in tonality are very subtle but very noticeable, and it's very helpful when you're deciding what you want your exposure to be. Also, this I forgot what I was going to say. The lower right, this drain pipe coming out of this curb, I initially thought that I was going to have to dodge to keep the detail and keep it from getting crushed, but it didn't work out that way. But when you do 1 second increments like this, also I have the enlarger on and I move my sheet, my card over, so this way I don't have to account for the intermittency effect from the light coming on and off and the filament burning up and then coming off. When you do your test prints like this, what you see is what you get. So whatever 5 seconds looks like, 10 seconds look like, when you do your final print, that's what you're going to get. You don't have to calculate or turn your enlarger off and on and off and on to get the same exposure or try and compensate for the intermittency effect. So everything that I do is really, the purpose is to save from doing unnecessary steps, save paper, save time, because this can turn into a really, really long and painful process if you are constantly working against yourself. And so here's my working print. This turned out really well. I ended up doing this at 10 seconds, and I didn't have to burn the lower right corner at all. I didn't have to dodge the lower right section at all. This is just a straight print, and I'm really happy with this. This is really kind of the result of a lot of practice, exposing and developing and understanding light and how the film handles it. You know, this, if I would have taken this image, 5 years ago, I would have had a hell of a time doing it, printing this, because I would have been dodging here and burning in the bright sections of that curb. But when you take the time to teach yourself and to understand exposure, it gives you the ability to capture the image correctly, and it gives you a negative that prints easily. This is really the goal when you are exposing to print in a darkroom. It's not like doing it when you're scanning these. I mean, this is an entirely different ball game here. When you are printing your negatives traditionally, you want to do everything possible to get it right in camera. It saves you so much time and labor in the darkroom when you're able to just get your exposure right, adjust your contrast to get you where you want to be, and make the print. So now that I got my prints done, this is a process that I do that isn't discussed much or talked about or shown, especially in the online photography community, because most of what gets done is just posted somewhere online, whatever's popular you know, at this time, like Instagram, Facebook. Right now, you know, these things will change with time, but you know, this is what, when I'm looking at a scene, I am asking myself, how is this going to look on a wall? How is this going to make me feel when I see it on a wall? And how is this going to translate from real life to still life to hanging on a wall? And this is what, when I capture an image, this is what I'm thinking of. So I am cutting out a matte and a mount, both the same size. I'm going to be using a 28, an 18 by 24 inch frame. So I'm measuring everything out, and I am sizing it and getting it cut down to size. Now this is the matte cutter that I'm using is like a professional grade matte cutter. This is not necessary at all. I used a simple ruler guide rail with just a simple hand matte cutter for a long time. This rule that you see me using, that Logan adapter rule, has a guide rail on the side that you use, and I use that with 2 different cutters, and I cut a lot of mats like that. So this is not necessary. It's just that, you know, once you get to a certain point where you are doing a lot of these, or you're just, you know, in my sake, I'm just fully committed to this. Like, I'm all in. And when you go all in, like, this is what it takes. You know, I've got this matte cutter set up on a, you know, it's got its own stand, its own table. I've got a dry mount press. Like, I've got everything that I need to produce the highest quality work that I possibly can. Like the tools, I have all the tools that I need. But, you know, it's not for everyone. For a casual photographer, you can do this just as good with much less expensive tools and get the exact same results. The difference here is just that this is like a production kind of tooling. So you can cut, you know, 50 or 75 or 100 mats a day. This goes into like a framer shop. Anyway, so I'm using archival tape here to hinge this mat. I just put 2 small pieces on the hinge, and that keeps them together and keeps the mat and the mount lined up while I'm moving it around. And then once I got that done, I am going to double check everything, where everything's looking good. And then once I kind of get it where I'm happy with it, I'm going to pull it back out, and I'm going to use what's called a T-hinge on the print. I'm going to put a very small amount of tape just on the very top of the back side of the print, and then I use another piece of tape and form a T, and then that's what I'm going to use to mount the print. And the idea is to just hang the print inside the mat, just from the very top. And this allows for expansion and contraction with temperature and humidity and time as everything moves around inside the frame, so you don't get ripples and wrinkles and creases in the print as time goes by. So I've got a standard frame I got here from Michaels. I'm pulling it out and cleaning the glass. I'm just using a really this glass polish works very well. It makes the glass invisible. It works like a car polish, but for glass. So I go through and I do both sides of this. You let it dry to a haze and then buff it out. It works quite well. And then when I'm done with this, I go over it one time with a glass polishing cloth, and then one last time with my anti-static brush, and then it's ready to receive the mat with the print. Before it goes in the frame, I am going to sign it just before it goes in. That's the last thing I do. And the signing the prints is really, you know, it is the light at the end of the tunnel. When you sign your prints, it's completion. It is the end of all of the hard work for that particular image. When you're doing a series, it's just a repetition over and over. But when you get to the point where you're signing prints, it's a great feeling of accomplishment and pride, and it always makes me feel proud. It's akin to when you see your image come up in the developer, you know, that's kind of like your halfway point. When you sign your prints and they go on the wall, it's really an amazing feeling, and it gives me a feeling of great pride, and I enjoy it every time. It reminds me of why I'm doing this. So when I put the image up, when I put the picture up, you know, the first thing I'm looking for on it is I'm looking for anything I missed, any dust I missed, or any like a beard hair of mine that's like stuck between the mat and the glass that I missed or something, you know, the simple little mistakes. And once I give it a once over and I see that everything's okay, I like to just take it in. It's nice. You know, when I first put a print up, I'm not thinking about really what the image means to me at that moment, because, you know, when you hang it up, you're just really happy, and it can be overwhelming, and it's just it's a joyful experience, and that has a tendency to maybe cloud your judgment. I know it does with mine, and so I like to leave it there. And as the days go by and I walk past it and I see it every day, it really gives me a better idea of how I feel about it. And so this is my viewing area here. It's a little corner in my apartment that I've set up with the proper lighting, and this is where I view my prints. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for checking it out.